You're listening to the Growing On podcast, where we dig into the heart of Georgia agriculture. Each episode, we explore the people, stories, and issues shaping the fields, farms, and food that keep our state growing strong. From the latest in ag policy and innovation to timeless farming traditions, we're here to keep you informed and inspired. Here's your host, John Holcomb.
I'm happy to be here in Watkinsville, Georgia today with Pam Knox. Pam is an agricultural climatologist with the University of Georgia. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Great, thank you for letting me come out today. It's a beautiful day, as we just said. It's very sunny. I think it's almost 60 degrees already. I think it's 55.
That's nice to be out of my office.
Yeah, we have beautiful scenery. Those of you that are listening, you have to just kind of picture it. You got cows in the background. They're eating some hay and just perusing around the field.
There should be some babies back there.
There are,
too.
yeah, there's several. But we're here to talk about drought conditions.
Yep.
So let me read you what I found. I looked at this morning. This is last week's data.
Yep.
From the U.S. Drought Monitor. Here in Georgia, every single county as of February the 12th is in drought status of some sort. Almost 25% of those counties are in D3 and 76% in at least a D2. Does that sound accurate?
That does sound
okay.
right, yeah.
So with that being said, just talk about the current drought and just kind of give us a picture of what's happening here in Georgia drought-wise.
Sure. Well, and when you think about the drought, this is something that's been really building for a long time. In fact, you can go back to last summer to see where the drought really kind of got its roots. And we had a lot of rain early in August. There are some places not too far from here that got 10 inches in just a few days. And after that, the heavens stopped. And we got much drier because temperatures are pretty warm. We had no rainfall from tropical systems at all, which is unusual for Georgia. You know, even if we don't get big storms, we usually at least get some little named storms or even just some disturbances that come across the state. And typically in Georgia, about 30 to 40% of our summer rain comes from tropical systems. We didn't get any of that, and so we have gone into these dry conditions, and they've been very persistent over the winter. We're in a La Niña right now, and typically when we're in a La Niña, a lot of the more active weather pattern stays to our north, and we stay warm and dry. And you would really think about that this year because, you know, we've had these couple of cold outbreaks. We've had some ice and we've had some snow in two separate events in parts of Georgia. But those are pretty short-term events, and because it was so cold, it didn't drop a lot of moisture. Even the rain that we had this past week was very hit or miss. And so some places got over an inch, other places got a lot less than that. And it really didn't do much to make a dent in the drought.
Okay. You actually already touched on my next question a little bit when you spoke about La Niña. Yep. We always, I feel like every time I'm here, we talk about La Niña, El Nino, or neutral conditions. You said that we're in La Niña. Is there, kind of explain that for someone out there that doesn't fully understand that, and
sure.
Talk about, you know, what comes next, and now that we're in one, maybe what we were expecting, or what maybe the prediction could be, I guess,
sure.
moving forward.
Sure. Well, La Niña and El Nino are two opposite sizes of the same oscillation, which starts, and you see it the most obviously in the Eastern Pacific Ocean. So there, when the temperature of the Eastern Pacific Ocean is warmer than usual, we get an El Nino. That warmth creates thunderstorms there, which pushes the atmosphere around. So it's kind of like putting a rock into a river. It changes the circulation pattern of the ocean. And it changes the circulation pattern of the atmosphere above the ocean as well. And we are kind of downwind of that, and so we are the beneficiary, if you want to call it that, of whatever is happening in the Eastern Pacific Ocean. Now, this past winter, we have been in a La Niña, which means the water in the Eastern Pacific Ocean is colder than usual. And that usually results in a lot of the most active weather patterns to be farther up to the north, so maybe more over the Ohio River Valley than over the southeast. It's been a little interesting this year because it's been a pretty weak La Niña, so we've had these couple of cold outbreaks that have come through. We had a pretty early frost in November for at least South Georgia that ended the growing season earlier than usual down there, although it was about right on time for North Georgia. Then we had two cold outbreaks in January that brought ice in one case and snow in the other case to parts of the state. Those were pretty short term, but it just shows it's not a very strong La Niña, so it's allowing this cold air to occasionally break away from the North Pole and come down to us. And so that has caused some of these cold conditions. It's caused a lot of problems. I mean, the freeze went all the way down to central Florida this year, so they had a lot of problems down there. And of course, it covered all of Georgia as well, and a lot of issues for vegetable growers and so on. Of course, a lot of agriculture right now is dormant, but it did cause problems for citrus growers, caused problems for some blueberry growers, although again, mostly that was down in Florida where it's a little bit more active as far as the season goes, and some other problems as well. The drought has caused a lot of problems for forage producers because it's been so dry. They had trouble getting any seeds in the fall, and so they don't have a lot growing because it's been cold and it's been so dry, and so a lot of people are having to either get rid of cattle or they're going to have to buy hay to make sure that their herds can get through.
Awesome. So one thing I want you to touch on next is just the this is typically the wintertime here in Georgia is typically a wet season. But it's kind of the opposite of that right now, obviously, by the drought monitor. And again, by the time this episode airs and people see this, this week's will come out, and it could be a little different. But I don't think, like you said, last week's rain was kind of hit or miss. So that being said, this is supposed to be a wet time of year. What type of implications should or could we expect moving forward in terms of agriculture for this growing season?
Yeah. Usually winter is the time of year when we're recharging our soil moistures because the plants are dormant for the most part. They're not using a lot of moisture. And of course, temperatures are low, so evaporation is also low. And so this is the time of year when we build up our soil moisture reserves going into the next growing season. And because it's so dry, we don't have those reserves there. It's for people who are going to try to plant in the spring, if you don't have any moisture, it's hard to get those seeds to germinate. So that's a concern. Also, once the plants come out of dormancy and start growing, they're going to use up every bit of soil moisture and whatever rainfall we get. And so if we would go into a dry spell in the spring, which could happen, there's no reserves. It's like having a checking account with no money in it, right? There's no reserves, and so the plants really struggle then to get established. So more typically than not in Georgia, when we have a La Niña in the winter, we are more likely to see a drought in the next growing season. Doesn't always happen because there's other factors that are going on too, but it is more likely to happen. And so that's really what I'm watching for as we go into the next growing season.
If this persists in the current way that it's going, you're the expert, so correct me if I'm wrong here, for real, please do. So looking back, it has really intensified the last 3 months, is whenever it's gotten really bad, I think. Is that fair to say?
When you think about it, we have hardly had any rain. I think Macon's less than 40% of usual rainfall. And the temperatures, except for those outbreaks, have been pretty much warmer than usual, or at least close to normal. And so there's still some evaporation going on, not a lot. And so all of that is just combining together to make it really hard to come out of. We've had these storms that have come through, and they're really good because we can use that rain. I think we're going to get another one probably next weekend or shortly thereafter. But it's not enough, and it's very spotty. And so a lot of people don't really get much benefit from that.
Okay. What crops usually tend to suffer more from this type of drought, particularly this time of year? Obviously, you don't know the prediction. You don't know what's going to happen. It could shift. It could shift completely. But based off of what we're seeing in the forecast, at least for the next couple of weeks, this may be sticking around for a little bit.
Yeah. I think one of the problems is going to be having enough soil moisture for seeds to germinate. So for anybody who's planting seeds, this time of year it would probably be more likely corn because corn takes colder soil temperatures than other things like cotton and peanuts do. That's a little bit later in the year. Blueberries, they usually irrigate. The drought has caused some questions to me about whether it's okay to do irrigation for freeze protection when you're in a drought because you're using up water you might need later. And that's a hard question to answer. If you can't keep your berries in good shape to be able to sell, then you're not going to be able to irrigate them later. And so that's a tough question. I think right now the forage is probably, and winter grains are probably the biggest things because they're going to be coming out of dormancy pretty early, and the farmers are going to really need that for their cattle. So that's something that I think is probably one of the most primary things. Early season vegetables, here we're mostly talking about cabbage and things like that can handle some cold to need that water. And of course, a lot of that may also be irrigated, so that may be less of an issue as long as they have access to the water.
Okay.
So those are the kinds of things I'm looking at. It's really too early at this point to worry about more of the bigger commodity crops. I will say that in the drought of 2016, we had dry conditions going into the growing season, and we had a dry spell in May and early June, and the northwest part of the state had corn that was pollinating. There was no rain for 3 weeks, and they lost their entire crop pretty much in that 3 weeks because it was so dry. The silk just dried up and the pollen couldn't stick to it. I don't know that we're going to see that this year, but that would be one consequence we could see.
Okay. So you touched on it just a smidge when it comes to reserves of water, right? Is this at this point, from someone like me that doesn't fully understand the science behind it, isn't immersed in it like maybe you are, for instance, but like in a sense of like, is at this point, is it more whenever we're a drought, is it more of like a topsoil moisture type thing or soil moisture type situation, or at this point, like you said, are we getting into that point where our reservoirs may be starting to evaporate because of warmer temperatures and things like that? Is that a valid question?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, the soil is usually the first thing to dry out on the top because the sun hits it and gets warm and it evaporates and so on. So as time goes on, that effect works down deeper into the soils, and you can really check that. The reservoirs in North Georgia are down. I think I read this morning Lake Lanier is down about 5 feet.
Wow.
It's not as bad as it was in the 2007 drought for sure. And that was more of a summer drought. It was really bad in July of 2007. So we're not as bad off, certainly at this point, but definitely the soil is dry for quite a ways down. It's not just the surface. I think the aquifers in South Georgia are still doing okay. I haven't looked specifically at the depths there, but people still seem to be able to get access to that water. And now, of course, they drill down to a bunch of different aquifers in different depths, and so they're always looking for new sources of water. I haven't looked at the stream flows yet either, so I'm not sure how much of an effect that would be having. But if we're not getting any rain, the stream flows have to be lower than usual.
Okay.
Yep.
I guess one last question for you would be, as we look toward the next few weeks and, based off of weather patterns and based off of trends from the years past and what have you, what can growers, I guess, expect hopefully or expect overall in the next few weeks or months?
Yeah. Well, we are seeing a pattern where we're getting rain coming more often than it was, which is good because then it will bring at least some moisture to the surface. Whether or not that gets down really depends on an extensive period of having wetter conditions. And I don't necessarily see that yet. So I think farmers that are worried about soil moisture are going to have to watch that carefully, watch the weather to see when they're going to have the wetting and hope that it hits their areas. I mean, soil temperatures are starting to rise, and so it's almost time to start thinking about planting, especially in South Georgia. But you have to couple that with the idea of how much moisture there is for the seeds, and you don't want to put stuff into the ground if it's not going to germinate because you just wasted that seed.
Okay. One other thing I do want to get you to mention while we're here. For anyone out there, growers included, producers included, that maybe would like more information on kind of what we just talked about. Yep. I know that you have a blog and you could happily mention that if you'd like, or other resources. Like, what other resources could they find out there?
There's a lot of good information about El Nino and La Nina. You can search for it. Usually you'd want to go to like a government source or something maybe an education source to get information that you can trust. But there's a lot of it available. You could go to my blog. The site is site.extension.uga.edu/climate and search on there. And I've had some things in the past or put some links in the past as well. So that's certainly one place that you can look. There's also a big drought website, drought.gov, that has information about droughts all across the country, including the Southeast. And so they have the most current drought. I know right now they're working on the next map, which will come out on Thursday.
Awesome. Well, that's it. That's all I have. Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks for listening to the Growing On podcast. Be sure to tune in soon for our next episode. Until then, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already.